Hey, what's up, guys? X Morgan with My Spiritual Life. I've got my husband here, Jared. X Jared. You were previously Jared, no longer Jared. Today we're going to be talking about the phrase "happy wife, happy life." And to start off, I'm going to start off by reading a comment from a forum that I posted this in. I wish husband rhymed with life. That made me laugh so much. Okay, so a little bit of backstory really quick. I'm curious what your guys' experience is for those of you who weren't raised Mormon, because I feel like being raised Mormon, the culture in Mormonism was largely this kind of like the culture was reflected very well in that phrase. I felt like there was a lot of like families where it was like, yeah, the man is like the head of the household, but like the wife is the one that is really in charge because she's the one that's raising enough hell to get whatever way she wants. So I noticed that expression being shared a lot in more within more my Mormon circles growing up, the happy wife, happy life. And I'm curious, like, what was your guys' experience with that? Did you see that in whatever religion you grew up in, or maybe you weren't religious? Was that a Mormon thing? Was that a society thing? I really want to know. Um, yeah, one last thing I'll add, and we can just kind of jump to wherever, is that we talk a lot as ex-Mormons. There's a lot of talk about sexism within the religion against women, but I think that there is sexism against the men as well in a different way. And I think that this culture of happy wife, happy life is a perfect example of that. Yeah, so thanks for being here. Comment where you're watching from, and let's have a party.
Yeah. So I kind of always took issue with the phrase because I was like, I just don't quite understand why anybody would want to make his wife happy, you know? Like whenever my wife is happy, I'm just bummed.
Oh my God.
No. Okay. So there's two things you got to understand about the phrase happy wife, happy life. First off, I want you to replay in your head every single time you've ever heard that phrase. You've never heard it come from a man who wasn't just completely like dead-eyed, like, happy life, happy life. He's like trying to remember what a smile was. You know, I've never seen it come from somebody who is a happy person, who has a happy life. It's always coming from absolute misery. The other thing is it's always important to define your terms before you start discussing a thing like this, because it might get confusing otherwise. And so the term happy, for example, like you have to let me define what I mean by happy, because most men who say happy wife, happy life seem to have a really bastardized version of what happiness is. And what they think a happy wife is a person to whom you give in at every moment. It's basically like you meet every immediate whim of this person. But most people, if you really press them on the definition of happiness, it's more of a long-term thing, right? It's more of a
like feeling fulfilled and
yeah,
feeling
it's
like,
not just like
right.
experiencing immediate gratification.
Right.
It's in the long term. You not only are you joyful, but you're like fulfilled. Like happiness is kind of this all encompassing word. So that's sort of where I've been in arguments with people about this phrase before. They're like, why wouldn't you want your wife to be happy? And I'm like, I do. Okay. So shut up. That's not what I'm saying. I think it's a formula for, ironically enough, a very unhappy wife. Like and an unhappy husband. Because
an unhappy relationship.
Yeah. So I think it's a bad thing for men and for women. And I say that because I think for men and this isn't just a Mormon thing. This is pretty like large Western culture thing, this happy wife, happy life nonsense. For the men, it sucks because you're kind of like you exist to please this other person, and that's a pain in the ass. And you have to bend over backwards and cater to her will or whatever. I'm not talking about Morgan, okay? But for women, it sucks because it's like, what a dismal view of women, that they're these spoiled children that like you have to like keep happy. It like when somebody says happy wife, happy life, I'm picturing like holding a baby who just shrieks over every dumb little thing. Like, what do you, your wife is not dumb, and she's not, unless you marry someone dumb. I don't know. In which case, you're also probably
Like
dumb.
me.
So, what? In which case, you're also probably dumb. So you're a good match, I guess. But your wife
Oh my god.
is an adult. Treat her like an adult. An adult can handle the truth. She can handle like momentary discomfort for long-term happiness, and that's the opposite of what happy wife, happy life is.
Yeah, so the phrase happy wife, happy life, what it makes me think of, because some people could interpret it differently. Like one of the comments on the forum I got was like, happy spouse, happy house. I believe both spouses need to work together to make each other happy. I like that. I don't love it. And I'm curious to hear your opinion about it. But I think it should be happy individual and then happy relationship and then happy house. And the reason why is because if you are trying to make each other happy, that is a really it can be a very toxic mindset. So you should be focused on your needs, your wants, and then the other person should be focused on their needs and their wants, and then you're coming together and meeting in a compromise. So the beef I have with the phrase happy wife, happy life is kind of this like the relationship is not an equal partnership. Both partners' desires and happiness is not on the same level. I think oftentimes when this phrase is used, it's men feeling like they are like pandering to what their wife wants because they just want to keep the peace in the house and not because they are coming from a place of genuine like wanting to help their wife succeed or whatever. It's more like, well, I don't want her to get mad at me, which is just incredibly dysfunctional.
Yeah, so I've heard people say that in response. They'll say happy spouse, happy house. And I understand that as a rebuttal, because when somebody takes issue with the phrase happy wife, happy life, they think that the only thing you're taking issue with is how it's lopsided. And I don't like that it's lopsided, but that's actually not even the main thing that bothers me about it. The thing that bothers me about it is that like you can then it's almost like you're holding yourself hostage in a way. Like I don't know, people will treat you as poorly as you allow them for the most part. That's a little bit of cynicism for me. And people will continue behaviors that are rewarded, right? So if you don't want a behavior to repeat, stop rewarding it.
Right.
And that's what these men do. I used to feel a lot of sympathy for them.
Can you give an example?
I'll give you an example. Yeah. I used to feel a lot of sympathy for these men, and because I would see them do this, I talk to these guys at work all the time, and I had a big rant about this very thing today.
Wait, was it the thing you texted me and I responded? That'll be perfect for the show tonight.
No, I don't
Oh,
know
is
if
this one else?
I don't know if I told you about this, but
Oh, okay.
I talk to guys, and at work you'll hear these guys saying, "Oh yeah, my wife is blah 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 blah," or like, "Oh, women, right?" I'm like, dude, shut up. Okay, that's not what this is. Me complaining happy wife, happy life is not a bashing women thing. If anything, I'm shitting on men because like we're doing it to ourselves. It's like you make this terrible bed and then you're really pissed off that you have to sleep in it. So the example is like this guy that I work with who's really old. He's in his 70s. And there's sort of this running gag going on that like, oh, how come he's not retiring yet? Because he's got to have enough to retire on. He's got a good pension and stuff. And the response is always his wife won't let him. And they said that, and I was like, why doesn't he just do it anyway? And they're like, oh well, happy wife, happy life. Like, but he's not happy. He's in his 70s. and he's still working. He could be retired. He's not don't pretend that he's happy. And they go into this thing like, well, you gotta keep him happy because like they'll force you to not like they're not letting him, she's not letting him retire. And I'm like, no, that's never happened. It's literally never happened. I guess minus gun to your head experiences where like a woman holds a gun to your head and makes you do something. But like your wife never makes you do anything. She might, you might have a crappy wife or a crappy husband who tries to like manipulate you and hold their own emotions hostage. But she can't force you. Like I've talked to guys that are like, man, I really wish I could watch the game this weekend, but the wife says no TV. Like, just watch it anyway. She's being unreasonable. You worked all week. Go home and watch the game that you want to watch. And like, nah, I gotta keep her happy. She's not a happy person. If she's sitting there telling you, like, no, you enjoy this thing? No. And it's, she can't force you. And I explain that very loudly to my bosses. I'm like ranting and yelling as loudly as I am right now in the middle of my lunch break today about how, no, they can't force you to do anything. This is all your own fault. I don't feel bad for any of you. And
oh my God.
And they're like, well, I can make your life hell. It's like, no, you walk away. If somebody's like, well, if you do that thing that you enjoy doing, then I'm gonna give you the silent treatment. Oh no. The person who wants to make my life hell is not gonna talk to me for a little bit. That's fine. Just walk away.
So this comment here from Finding Craigie, he has to keep working or she'll withhold sex, maybe.
I don't know, man. He's 70s. His wiener probably doesn't work anymore.
Oh my God. If your wiener doesn't work when you're that old, I'm leaving you. Okay, so I have some thoughts about this because I think when you decide to be married to someone, you have to treat it like a partnership, right? And there has to be some give and take. And I think the examples Jared is bringing up is there's a lot of men that Jared work with that feel very victimized by their wives, like feeling like their wives won't let them do whatever it is that they are wanting to do, as simple as like watch a sports game. And just how toxic that is, because if you're two adults living together, one of you should not be telling the other one what to do in those kind of circumstances. And you guys should be working together to hold each other accountable to like good standards and, you know, healthy practices. Like, but setting an ultimatum over something as silly as watching a football game is just, in my opinion, extremely unhealthy. And to me, that is a big sign of someone that has some serious control issues. Because what you notice is when someone has issues with control, maybe they feel insecure, they have anxiety, or they have something going on, childhood trauma, and they don't know how to manage it well, they will cope by trying to control other people. And I think that is often what's happening in a lot of these situations. So okay, I want to come back to that comment really quick. The like, maybe they're going to withhold something, right? And that is manipulative, right? So it's possible that that these guys that Jared's referencing, like the wife is going to somehow punish him, you know, by giving him the silent treatment or withholding sex or withholding love or maybe even leaving the relationship. And that is incredibly unhealthy. And but it's hard when you're in an unhealthy relationship sometimes to know that that's unhealthy. And especially if you had a dad that was bossed around by his wife or vice versa, right? Maybe you had a dad that was bossing around your mom or whatever, what have you. On either end, it's unhealthy. I've seen it far more often in my life and with Mormonism, with women being more bossy toward men, but it happens both ways, surely. Anyway, let's see. Which one?
That one, yeah.
Yes.
So that one,
here, read it first. I think Jared is saying that women don't understand the needs of their spouses, maybe.
Yeah, that's what was said. And what I would say to that is it's not that women in general don't understand the needs of their spouses. It's that the wives of the men I'm talking about don't understand the needs of their spouses. And that's because the men won't tell them because they think
Yes.
it'll be
Okay.
painful. This all it all stems from this cowardice, really. Like you want to please your wife, but like you're too much of a coward to have a damn fight with her and kind of duke it out and get to the best solution because that's more difficult. That's going to make her angry for a little bit before things get better. And you understand that intuitively, but you know that it's going to be a bit of a pain in the ass to get there. So like you rather than taking like a lump sum of pain in the moment so that the rest of your life is better, you just kind of go with this steadily increasing dull ache for your entire life.
Right. Okay, so backstory to you a little bit to kind of explain the context of this a little bit more is that Jared works with a lot of primarily men out where he works, and for years and years he's been working there and listening to a lot of these men complain about how their wives won't let them do this and their wives won't let them do that. And Jared used to kind of, and you can correct me, but he used to kind of get mad, like, what's with these wives like being so controlling? And now he's realizing, like, wait a second, like these men are letting them be controlling. Like, I don't feel bad for them anymore. Is that kind of like a good?
Yeah, pretty much. So
Right.
I still don't understand their wives because
And it's
like
not healthy. It's not excusing their behavior, but like the problem is on both ends because she's being over controlling and then he's letting her be over controlling.
yeah, so
Yeah.
it's I still don't understand the wives, obviously, because like Morgan has things she likes doing. And I can't imagine telling her, no, you can't do that thing you like doing this weekend. Like this guy was like a normal guy
Right,
that
right.
wanted to watch. That was a real example. The guy wanted to watch the football game. His wife didn't let him because she said that the kids needed to study for their SATs. So no TV this weekend. And he says that includes even him in his own room watching the game on his own. And so I don't I don't understand her because I don't know why you would be with a partner that you supposedly love if you're going to tell them, oh, all the things you like doing. No, not anymore. You don't get to do it.
Right.
Like anytime you have to sacrifice doing a thing you like, there's got to be a reason. Because obviously you have to. Because on the other end of it, like I've been with people where they're like, "Oh, let's do this thing this weekend." I'm like, "Oh yeah, I'll ask my wife about it." And they're like, "Oh yeah, she's got your balls, huh? Gotta go ask permission." I was like, "No,"
And I'm like, no, bitch.
it's not permission. It's we have to see if we have conflicting plans. We have a life together. We have kids.
Right.
And
Yeah, like we don't ask each other permission to do things. We just say, "Hey, I want to do this on this day. Can you watch the kids?" Like we swap off a lot on the weekends because we
Yeah.
both have hobbies. We both have friends, and honestly, we don't have a lot of overlapping friends. But that doesn't really bother me all that much.
Yeah. But anyway, the more I heard this, like the first time I heard that phrase, it set off alarm bells and I didn't like it. But the more I heard these men complain about like their happy wife, happy life nonsense, the less sympathy I had for them because I was like, oh, you know what? All of this is well within your control because they're acting like it isn't. You're just
They believe it isn't. They feel like it isn't.
well, and then they get massively uncomfortable when I tell them that it is because I'm not super nice. I get real fired up when if I just want to shake him and be like, all of your problems are so solvable, and they're not complicated. It might hurt a little bit for a little while, but holy shit.
Right. But they don't feel like that their problems are that solvable, and they don't feel that way for a reason. And
They don't want to.
well, that maybe they don't want to solve their problems, or they are caught in a belief that is like that causing harm or causing confrontation isn't worth it. Like, these they might have these kind of ideas in their head that's kind of keeping them stuck. I was going to add, like, I know for example, with my mom and dad, very dysfunctional. And my dad never felt like he could ever get his way with my mom. And one way she would do that is by over exhausting him. Like, she would go on and on and on and on until he finally just, like, gave up. Like, he knew that the argument wouldn't end until, like, she would it's a manipulation tactic. Like, she would just, like, keep pushing until he was, like, unwilling to even stand up for his own side anymore. And another thing too was that, another tactic can be like you portray yourself as feeling really, really hurt and really upset, and that can be another manipulation tactic. Okay, so Finding Craig, you said, are the men Mormon, the ones that you're talking about? I don't
Some
know.
of them are. The guy that was wanting to watch the game wasn't actually.
Okay, and then it's hard to know they are controlling in the beginning. Yeah, my brother just got divorced. He didn't know at the start. Yes, because a lot of people who are really controlling and really manipulative, they're smart enough to know not to show that, that side of things until later.
Yeah, and plus you enter into a marriage thinking, well, I don't want to be controlling and manipulative. So obviously, to the person that I love. So obviously, the person that I love isn't going to want to be controlling and manipulative to me either. So that's you kind of just give people the benefit of the doubt.
Right, right. Okay, let me see here. Maybe he could go to someone else's house and watch the game. Yes, although I will say I would say that this is still not a solution to the problem, because it sounds like the wife is being totally unreasonable.
Yeah, his wife
Contention
was.
is of the devil, though. Very good point.
Yeah, it is. This guy's wife was absolutely nuts, and he was absolutely the archetype of the weak man who gives into everything. And that was his solution. He wanted to see, well, does anybody need help on their car or something? And I could come over and watch the game while I'm helping you with your car. I was like, Jesus, dude, just come on. Just watch the damn game. She'll be mad. Oh, no.
Right. But for some men, that feels like...
Well, somehow that's worse than a lifetime of this.
Yeah, which is sad. Okay, this comment reminds me of the nice guy syndrome, which the church definitely perpetuates. I've been a recovering nice guy for years now. It involves a lot of conscious unlearning. Totally agree.
Yes. I believe Scott is probably a very nice guy. Me and Scott go way back in Facebook groups.
Oh, I see.
But that No More Mr. Nice Guy book is pretty good. Me and Morgan's brother were actually reading it together. We need to get back into it. But
that book even helped me.
Well, the book is helpful because because this actually is a good segue into the whole nice guy thing, because men get that sort of idea. And this is sort of a societal problem in a way, that we do deify niceness like it's the only thing that really matters. We see it in our movies and stuff. Like, you can be, like, as a guy, you can be like gross and unhygienic and dumb and all this stuff, but as long as you're nice, you get the girl in the end. But that's not real. And it's also a thing that No More Mr. Nice Guy book points out is nice. They call themselves nice guys, but they're not really very nice. It's like they constantly keep a tally mark in their head of all of the nice things that they've done that
no one appreciates.
Yeah, that
them for.
I've done the dishes like 18 times and I still haven't gotten laid or whatever. But they haven't told their wife that I'm expecting to get laid sometimes. They don't ever confront it head on. They're like, oh, they just continually do the thing that doesn't work.
Okay, there's something that feels good, right, about staying in that victimized space, right?
People like their ruts.
Because it's like, instead of voicing like, hey, like, I did the dishes because I was hoping that I could get this need of mine met because I was meeting a need for you. Instead of voicing that, it's like they're setting themselves up to fail, like by setting all these invisible expectations that you don't know about, that they can be mad at you for not following through with. And there's some kind of safety in it. And I'm trying to think of what that is, that safety of like, maybe it feels it somewhat feels good to feel victimized because you are validating your own like experience, like the bad things that are happening to you. You can be like, yeah, see, look, here's proof that I am
People like
just
their
having such a hard time.
people like their ruts. People like being
They're
they
comfortable
like
in
being
some
victims.
ways.
We sort
Right.
of glorify victimhood, and plus, it. Yeah, I don't remember what I was gonna say.
Oh, he's got a good one here. Dr. Glover calls those covert contracts. Yeah, I love
That's
that.
Dr. Glover is the one that wrote that No More Mr. Nice Guy book.
Okay, so with the too nice thing, okay, right, we set up niceness as this like epitome of that's the best thing that you can be because being mean is bad, so being nice is good. And you can be too mean, and that would be terrible. But people don't think about how terrible being too nice is. And we don't think right off the bat that being too nice is a bad thing. How could you have too much niceness? But you can, and it's all about bringing it into balance because too much niceness, what it looks like is these men who spout happy wife, happy life, who are not happy, who are not fulfilled, who don't have autonomy or control over their lives. And ultimately, too nice is not ideal, too mean is not ideal. But I think that people themselves will tend to err on the side of too nice because they're scared of being too mean. And I think women sometimes will look for men who err on that side of too nice um, because they would rather have a husband that's too nice than too mean.
Yeah. So I think a lot of people can understand this when you frame it as like a parent to children, because everybody knows that like you can spoil children and that ruins children, that it
Right.
turns them into people that are just unlikable. If every time your kid screams, you give them exactly what they want, they're going to continually scream. But people tend to think that we outgrow that, and we don't. Like we don't. We Most people will continually do behavior that is rewarded, and so if you're rewarding really shitty behavior, you can't be all that shocked when most of what you get is shitty behavior.
Right. And I think the best thing you can do in that situation is kind of turn your anger against them or your resentment against them back on yourself to motivate yourself to try to stand up for yourself. Now, I might be wrong about that, but I would like to hear your thoughts on that. Also, let's see here. An XJW said, I'll give the best advice. If you don't like something your spouse cooked, tell them or you'll eat it for the rest of your life. It's funny. I love the way Jordan Peterson talks about this a lot of how like these little things that bug you, you don't think about how that little thing is going to bug you for 50, 60, 70 years. And so you might as well speak up and say something about it because why are you just going to keep letting this little thing erode and cause resentment in your relationship when it could just take a second to resolve and just say, hey, by the way, I don't like the way you do this or whatever.
Yeah, we don't like being direct and honest, and I don't think I've told this story on your channel yet, but I remember when I was a kid, my mom read me this book. It was called Poppleton. It's about this pig, and it's just an anthropomorphic pig, lives in a house. He gets a neighbor one day, and she's, I think, a donkey.
Oh,
Her
yes,
name is
yes.
Marianne, and Marianne is a very nice neighbor, and she invites Poppleton over for cheese toast. And he's like, oh, okay. And he goes over there. They have a good time. He goes home. And then the next morning, at the same time, she invites him again. He's like, yeah, okay, yeah, sure. And he goes, and they have a good time, and then he leaves. And then as the days go on, she keeps inviting him for this cheese toast. And he gets to the point where I don't really want to go all the way down to, oh my God, she asked me again. I hate her so much. Why does this bitch keep trying to be nice to me? And you start to resent behavior that you start to resent this repeated behavior, and you don't want to be mean out loud and tell the person that you resent the behavior or that you don't even want to do that thing. But internally, you get just vicious toward this person. Like he had this hatred. And she would always pop her head out the window and ask, "Do you want some cheese toast?" And he resented her more and more and more until finally he's watering his garden one day and she asks him, "Do you want cheese toast?" And he just like, "Rah!" just yells and he just sprays her in the face with his garden hose. And after he kind of cools down, he realizes what he's done. He's like, "I'm so sorry. I didn't really want to have cheese toast." She's like, "Why didn't you say that?" And he was like, I wanted to be nice. She's like, "Well, that's okay because I felt obligated. I was starting to get pissed off at you because you kept wanting to come over for cheese toast." So it was all this like massive miscommunication. People don't really as mad as you think they would if you're honest with them, especially if
Depends
you're
on the person.
no, there are people that will get
Yeah.
really mad, but if somebody gets mad at you for telling them a true thing that isn't mean spirited, like, "No, I don't want to go have toast right now." If they get mad at you, then well, great, you dodged a bullet. You don't have to associate with that person anymore. But most people, I think, will be like, "Oh, okay." They won't get angry with you.
So I love that story. That's happened to me in real life several times because I'm a recovering people pleaser, a nice gal. And I've literally had that happen for real in my life, and I get so frustrated when I feel like I can't tell these stories that are coming to my mind effectively. So I'm gonna jump to this other thing I was gonna say. Okay, so one thing I wanted to point out is that women who experience a lot of trauma, and I'm sure this goes for men too, but because we're talking about the happy wife, happy life thing, I'm going to frame it up this way. Women who experience a lot of trauma often will look for a spouse that they view as safe. And the way that they look for a spouse that they view as safe is one that won't challenge them, one that will just go along with what they want to do, go along with what ideas they have. And that environment is ideal for them in their mind. This is largely subconscious, but that environment is ideal for them because they are used to experiencing a lot of uh, possibly abusive, situations and things like that. And so they're looking for someone that they know is not going to hurt them. And a very, very weak man who's all about trying to please his wife is not going to hurt her. And she's going to just bulldoze right over him. And that is so, like, having some compassion, like, oftentimes this happens and it's not intentional, but that this situation is not for the best for either party. Because ultimately, a woman marrying a man who's very weak, it doesn't give her the opportunity to grow from her trauma because he's not going to confront her on any of her misdeeds or mistakes. And we all make mistakes. Doesn't matter what you've done in your life or what trauma you have or haven't experienced. We all make mistakes in relationships and when trying to run a household together. And if you can't have that banter back and forth to kind of get to a resolve, you won't grow as much. You won't learn as much. And the beauty of having two people in a partnership is that you have twice the cognitive ability to solve problems and to hold a mirror up to each other to say, hey, you're doing this thing wrong and here's why. And it's a beautiful opportunity for you both to grow. And that opportunity is taken away when you have this dysfunctional relationship where one person's in charge and the other is subservient. This comment says it's hard to be direct sometimes. It's really hard. It scares people a lot. It was really hard for us in the beginning of our marriage, and we've gotten way better at it now. And, of course, we're not perfect, but we are much, much better about being direct. And I would say that sometimes the reason people have a problem feeling like they can't be direct is because they're afraid of the other person's response. So they're afraid of being abandoned, they're afraid of being rejected, they're afraid of that person's feelings making them feel bad. So maybe you don't want to be direct about something to your husband, and it's because you're afraid it's going to upset him, and you're being over responsible for him being upset. But the problem with that, then that just leads to even more of a mess, because if you are so preoccupied with trying to rescue your partner emotionally, then you're never really going to have an honest relationship with them. And that's hard, and that's a hard pill to swallow, but we had to learn that along the way, and it was a bitch. But it makes all the difference when you can learn to just let the other person have their emotions, let them be upset if they're going to be upset about something, and then work together to resolve the issue, as best you can. If I have to, I use the sandwich technique. If people don't know what that is, it's like saying a bunch of positive things and then saying the thing you have a problem with, and then a bunch of more positive things. And I'm sure for some people that's super helpful. For me, I feel like it feels really fake. Like if Jared came up to me and was like, "Hey, sweetie, I love how you plowed my butthole last night, but you didn't dry the knives very well. But also, thanks for the cupcakes." I would just feel like just get to the point. Like just like I think I think we've gotten to a point in our relationship where we prefer being direct. But
Hey,
if
jackass.
if that's where you have to start, I think that is a great starting point, and maybe it will help your partner if they are particularly sensitive to criticism.
I don't like it because it reminds me of my mission. It's like, during companionship inventory, make sure you tell your companion before you tell them about your problem with them, all the things you love about them. So it's as soon as you start saying nice things, she's like, ugh, okay, hit me with it. Well, I would. A lot of the companions like, yes, I do knock doors very well.
I think for me, I try to make it an effort to be appreciative of the things that Jared does when I notice them, and that way I don't have to sandwich it in with a complaint later. Okay, let's see. We can say anything to anyone, but it's how we say it. It's no different in a relationship.
Oh yeah, I thought of that.
Not everyone will receive things well though, and that can be a growing moment for them, and you got to let them have that moment to grow if they're having a hard time with it. We've had those times.
Yeah, I don't know. Have I gone on a Prince Michigan rant yet on your channel?
We have over 200 videos. I have no idea.
Probably not yet. So there's I think about this in the sense of the concept of brutal honesty. Because anytime you meet somebody who says, "I'm just brutally honest," the first thing most people do is just roll their eyes, oh, whatever. Because that person just is a dick. Like they say that they're brutally honest, but what they're doing is they're hiding behind the concept of honesty to be brutal. They're much more interested in being brutal than they are in being honest, because you don't have to be brutally honest. Sometimes truth is brutal, but not all the time. So don't use that as an excuse to be a dick. And one of the best ways I learned this was in The Idiot by Dostoevsky. It's a good book. I like it quite a bit. And the main character, Prince Mishkin, is the titular idiot, right? He's known as being very slow, but I don't think he was really that slow. But everybody loves him. He's sort of got this infectious personality where people just immediately understand that he wishes them well. And one of the things that I noticed is he's not necessarily nice in the way that we would define it right now, but he clearly loves these people he's talking to. He doesn't lie to people. And he tells them truths that, whether or not it's hard, doesn't matter as much to him as this person needs to know the truth. And he'll tell them that. And it's so people can take criticism from Prince Mishkin in this book, people who normally couldn't, because he presents it in a way that I'm not trying to be brutal. I'm just trying to be honest. And if that is brutal, then so be it. And that sucks. But I want you to do better. Like I want you to improve from this knowledge that I'm giving you. And generally he makes the people around him better people because of it.
Yeah, yeah. I think for people who struggle with criticism, like I have in the past, I think it's our shame that makes it really difficult. So keep that in mind if your spouse, has, maybe a big reaction to you complaining about something, is that it's probably coming from their place of feeling ashamed and you're triggering that shame. I'm starting to think that we're never, I'm curious to hear your thoughts. I haven't shared this yet, but I'm starting to think that we're never really afraid of what other people think. We're afraid of other people pointing out to us what we are afraid is wrong with us. Does that make sense? I'll say it again. We're never really afraid of what other people think. We're afraid of other people noticing what we think is wrong with us. And because what I noticed for me in my life was that the more I did like cognitive behavioral therapy and things like that to feel more confident in myself as like a wife and a mom and a friend and just like all these things, the less I felt triggered by criticism or critiques. Jay said timing is important too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, don't tell your wife that she sucks at making cupcakes right after she cleaned up shit off the walls from your crazy 2-year-old. Jared, I like these parables you have. Jared is a walking metaphor
Jesus
announcer. Yeah, you're
I teach him parables.
Amen.
I died for your sins.
Not yet. Okay, I wanted to share a couple things I read from this article. This article had a quote and it says, "A man who bases his happiness around his wife's mood sounds very weak to me." And I loved that quote a lot because I think, okay, so I want to give an example. I had a friend who had just gotten into a relationship, and this was like a year ago that this happened. And so my friend Jill got into this relationship and she got into it really fast. And this guy was just like head over heels, like crazy about her. And he was like just showering her with gifts and with affection and with like attention and all this stuff. And in my head, I'm thinking like, this is like a little bit like much, right? But Jill is just like loving it and was like, oh, he just loves me so much. You see this like on reality TV shows and stuff too, or like Hallmark movies, which if you didn't know me and Jared watch a lot purely to critique them because they are so ridiculous.
They're pretty bad.
But you get this whole like this idea of romance from like the woman's perspective is that the man just gives up everything he is to just worship her feet, And what ended up happening with that relationship is that the longer they were together, the more Jill noticed that he didn't have a life of his own at all. Like he didn't have friends, he didn't have hobbies, like he didn't have much going for him. And so he was very obsessed with being with her all the time and trying to make her happy and trying to and then when they would get into arguments, he would then throw back in her face like, well, I did A, B, C, D, E, F, G for you. And so why can't you do this thing for me? Like just a very unhealthy kind of perspective, like very manipulative. Anyway, and so looking back now, I'm kind of like, I think it's one thing to court someone. I think it's another to just like act like so crazy in love with them that like you absorb your whole there. And I mean, we all feel kind of fully absorbed in romance at first, but for that, it started to appear to me that that was almost more of a red flag than it was a good thing. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why romance movies drive me so crazy too, because they are so unhealthy. They're so toxic. And women, it feeds this fantasy that like I think women struggle so much with their self-esteem that they want a guy who just like is so enthralled with them that it makes them feel good about themselves. Like they think it'll make them feel good about themselves. And so when a husband doesn't do that for them, they sometimes will be resentful of him. And really what's happening is that they have an insecurity that they don't know how to deal with, and they're blaming it on their partner. But that whole okay, so the whole romance movie thing is like the husband's like the boyfriend, whatever, is like giving up everything for her, giving up his career in the big city or whatever, like giving up whatever and putting it all on the line for her. And it's just like, that's not healthy. You should not have to give up who you are. You should not have to give up your career. You should not have to give up your friends for your relationship, unless any of those things were just unhealthy to begin with.
And if you are giving up all these things, then that's what you think a romantic partner is supposed to do. And so when she doesn't do that back, you're just going to get mad that like
you're gonna feel like that was in that Codependent No More book that I read. It was like you give up everything for everyone else and then wonder why no one is like attending to you.
Yeah.
Wait, can we share that example from that one person that may or may not work with you that was like, well, I'm really good at sex, so it's okay.
Oh my god. Yeah, of course.
Can you explain that?
Oh,
that story is like the best.
Yeah, I work with this woman who is like her husband is like the embodiment of happy wife, happy life. I've seen him in public one time, and it's just like like he mostly breathes through his mouth. He probably doesn't make eye contact when he says his name. He goes, and I can see why his wife is such a pain in the ass. She's not a good co-worker. I don't imagine she's a great spouse. And she somehow it got brought up when we were at work that the whole being whipped thing or whatever, and the happy wife, happy life thing. And she goes, oh yes, my husband knows who wears the pants in our relationship. And I was like, well,
and she's saying that like it's a good thing.
She's saying it's like it's a good thing. And I'm like, you understand
I feel like a lot of girls wouldn't admit to that. If they wore the pants, they wouldn't be like, yeah, I wear the pants. They would just be like, we're equal.
They'll more freely admit to it than guys will. Because if a guy says that, you're automatically going to be like, you sexist piece of shit.
Isn't that funny? I would think that same thing too about the happy husband, happy life. I'd be like, fuck you.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing the other way around.
So, and I'm pretty straight up with her. It's one of those things where I'm very honest with her, but I'm so honest that she thinks I'm joking about it. So it's kind of funny.
Oh my god, Jared.
But I was like, that sounds miserable. Like, oh, he knows who calls the shots. That sounds absolutely miserable to wait for permission to do anything as an adult. And she's like, oh, well, it's worth it because I'm great at sex. And I was just like, no, that's not worth it. She's like, well, you don't know how good I am at sex. And I was like, it doesn't matter how good you are. Nothing is worth that. Like, nothing is worth being this subservient piece of shit who's just there to obey your every stupid whim. And
for their entire life.
Yeah, like your sexual ability could consist of you like splitting into two Jessica Albas and like you both just blow my mind and I don't have to do anything at all. And then we drive away in a Ferrari or something like that. It still wouldn't be worth being like a shell of a man. Maybe your dignity shouldn't be for sale.
Oh man, yeah, especially not for sex. Oh, yeah, thanks. That story just really warms my heart.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. One other thing I was going to bring up about the whole partnership, right? Okay, happy wife, happy life is not a partnership. The beauty in having a partnership is twice the cognitive power, but also you have this ability to balance each other out because you're both going to have strengths and you're both going to have weaknesses. And the more that you can both like integrate those things, the more you can both grow and grow together. Yeah, that's what I was going to say about that.
Yeah, any good relationship is your wife or your husband challenges you. Like, it's difficult necessarily. It pushes you to be a better person.
Yeah.
They tell you when you're full of shit, hopefully nicely, and you can put up with that, and you guys can find a solution in between. But if you come into it with uh, if a woman comes into it having the perspective of happy wife, happy life, he's here to please me, then she's not looking to be challenged. She's looking for a doormat who will fall over and be safe to her every whim, no matter what. And if a husband comes into it thinking happy wife, happy life, then he's not looking for somebody to challenge him because you don't take this person seriously. Like,
Yeah.
if you think that a person is incapable of standing up on their own, if you think that she's just gonna fall apart and your entire existence, like, she will make your life hell, she will throw a tantrum or whatever, if she doesn't get every tiny little stupid whim met, then this isn't a person you take seriously. And if you don't take your wife seriously, she's probably not going to be a serious person, and she won't take you seriously, and you won't be a serious person, and it's just a spiral of bullshit.
Yeah.
So treat each other like partners and challenge each other.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's a lot to be said too about like not being able to trust each other if you're in that kind of relationship. And not to mention like, so there's a lot of different ways dysfunctionality can show up in a relationship. And one of those ways is when one person kind of assumes a parent role, the other person assumes like a child role. And you'll see that in these relationships where the woman is like talking down to her husband, like, how dare you watch the game after I told you not to watch the game? And he will become a little child in that moment. And you can watch his shoulders slump, his head go down, and like he will make himself small and like he will apologize and he will be small. And it's very dysfunctional if you if you find yourself falling into that with your spouse, and it can happen like on both ends in different areas. Like maybe your wife bosses you around when it comes to a certain thing, but maybe you boss her around when it comes to another thing. And you need to meet on the same level instead of coming at each other from this like high ground of like weird like parent child dysfunction.
Yeah, if you want a good illustration of what this does to men, go watch the Key and Peele sketch where it's probably called "And I Said Bitch." That's probably what it's called, but it's them.
That one is hilarious.
Yeah, it's them like complaining about their wives and an argument they got in. Like, yeah, she told me I'm gonna have to sleep on the couch, and I said, "Bitch," acting like they're all, like, I don't put up with shit from my woman,
But then they're like looking around to make sure she's not listening.
And it's funny because it's sad and true that the lengths that men will go to
I'll
to
link
pretend
it below later.
to pretend that they're willing to, not be a little coward and actually have that argument with their wife, but not actually ever do it.
That's so funny. That's so funny. So in the article I read, I'm going to link it below later. I think I forgot to add it earlier. It said, here's some ways that, one spouse could potentially control the other. And again, this article is specifically talking about happy wife, happy life. So it's specifically talking about more often women, but I'm sure it happens on either end, just depending on the context. So, so it says some ways women control men. 1, constantly checking up on him. 2, micromanaging him with things like you can't do the dishes right, or you can't change the diaper right, or things like that. telling him how he can or can't spend his time, which was one we talked about a lot. Like, you can't watch the game this weekend. And then this other one I thought was interesting was being overly emotional to trigger the damsel in distress response. I think that that's a big reason why husbands don't feel safe being honest with their wives, is because they're afraid that their wife is going to cry and get upset, and then they're going to feel bad, and then they have to make their wife feel better, and then it just feels like so counterintuitive. I know I felt that way in my relationship with my mom growing up. Because she was really like emotionally hurting a lot. And so if I tried to be honest with her about something that I felt like she did wrong, she would become so intensely upset and put the ball kind of in my court to like fix the situation, to basically apologize for whatever I brought up. And that is super unhealthy. And so the best thing you can do in a situation like that is to say, like, I'm sorry that you're hurting, but this issue is something that needs to be resolved. So what are we going to do about it? Like, you bring it back to that thing. Don't let that thing escape just because this person is getting really, really upset.
Yeah, and that is kind of a man issue that I think you're hardwired to sort of try to solve things,
Yeah.
which is not a bad thing for the most part. But if when you bring up something difficult, maybe your wife cries about it, you might freak out and be like, "Oh, I got to fix the crying. That's the thing I got to fix right now." But you got to kind of look at the long game and think, okay, like I said, people can understand this when it comes to kids. They know when you have a kid, you know that you're going to have to make your kid cry sometime. You're going to have to be the reason that your kid is crying, because like if your kid wants candy, like, no, you can't have candy all the time. He's
No
going to
candy
cry
for you.
because he thinks that's going to meet his need, But if you don't
Yeah.
do it, that's going to be painful for him, but it's a necessary thing he has to go through. You don't think that about adults. You don't think that about your spouse, that, like, I don't know, maybe if your husband or wife tells you that, like, if they start freaking out when you bring up something serious, when you bring up an actual grievance, you need to understand that, like, well, sometimes people need to hurt for a minute. If reality causes you pain, then you need a little bit of pain right now, and it's not fun, and I'm going to be here with you through it, but you got to experience it.
Yeah. Emotionally rescuing your partner doesn't give them the chance to grow. And it's also very exhausting for you. I read that book, Codependent No More. I did a video about it a couple weeks ago. And one thing that it talked about in there that really helped me a lot was this idea of if you keep rescuing people from their emotions, and you do that by not being honest with them, or when they get upset by apologizing even though it was honest what you said, then that rescuing of them and that fixating on them it's basically a symptom of an insecurity inside, that you're not feeling good enough. You don't feel good about yourself. And so the solution is to learn to feel good about yourself and not to keep rescuing other people, because the more you rescue other people, the weaker you keep them. Amen.
Amen. Closing prayer.
Yeah, where's Sister Jensen? Yeah, let's see. Let me see if I had any more comments from the forum to read really quick here. Oh, did I read this one already?
No.
When a man doesn't care or he has no interest, he can use that phrase to make himself look good.
Yeah.
Which is like exactly what I was saying.
Yeah, she's totally right about that. That's part of the nice guy syndrome, is just like saying, I am nice, telling everybody, happy wife, happy life. Like, oh, wow, isn't he so loving and sacrificial? He's willing to put his needs on the back burner, and he just cares so much about his wife's happiness. But it's a coward's way of looking like a noble man.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah, that was a really good point. I hadn't thought of that, actually.
Yeah. So to recap, why I don't like the term happy wife, happy life is because it doesn't set the marriage or the relationship as this equal standard. It's unhealthy for both partners. Neither of you are going to grow in the ways that you need to, and there's going to be a lot of resentment that's built up because of it. And additionally, I think that with happy wife, happy life, we would be upset about it if it were the other way around. If it was happy husband, happy life, like we would just so obviously be upset about it. And so I just think that that in itself is enough reason to say that this is very unhealthy. Yeah. Any remaining recapping thoughts?
Oh, just be a person and expect those that you associate with to be people as well. Don't treat them like I don't know. I think the men that believe in this whole happy life mantra treat their wives like children, like people they don't trust. Trust your wife to be able to deal with this shit. She's a big girl. She can handle, reasonable criticisms. Don't be a dick on purpose, but yeah.
I'll finish off by saying just a couple last things. I think that the best thing you can do to have a healthy relationship with someone is to have your own life and to make sure that you have friends, that you have an outlet, that you have hobbies, so that you're not obsessing over what that person is doing or feeling like you need to be around that person all the time. And if you feel like you're struggling to do that, read Codependent No More. It's super helpful. And if you are trying to figure out how to start being more honest with a spouse, whether it's your wife or your husband, and you're scared, just know that that's okay. And that oftentimes in relationships, we've been to marriage counseling before. Sometimes it was helpful. Sometimes it was hilarious how unhelpful it was. But one thing that the guy said that I thought was really profound, the one that was a little bit helpful, not the one that, you know what I mean.
I know what I mean.
That dick.
That dick.
Guy. That's a story for another day. But the guy that was helpful, one thing he said was that oftentimes in a relationship, things will get worse before they get better when these issues start to implode, when one spouse starts being more honest, or when this resentment has built up to an explosive point. So things will get worse before they get better. But then the cool thing is the better that you have to look forward to is way better than you were like previously. So like there's a better place to be, and you just got to keep that in mind when you're going through the thick of it with trying to be honest. And if you're scared to be honest, just start with baby steps. Just start being honest you can start being honest with little things like, I don't like watching that show, or I want to go to bed instead of doing whatever game you want to play or whatever. So start small if you have to, and try to work yourself up into being more and more honest, and you will feel more fulfilled. That partner will feel safer to be more honest with you, and you can both learn and grow and hopefully work through issues together and learn to communicate way better. I know for us, it's been super helpful. Finding Craigie said, I feel like if I reversed it to happy husband, happy life, I would feel like my feelings didn't matter. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. I totally agree. Well, thank you guys for joining us. I try to do these lives about every Tuesday night that I can. So check us out Tuesday nights, 7:30 Mountain Standard Time. Comment down your thoughts below on Happy Wife, Happy Life. What are your thoughts? I'd love to hear them. Also, please consider supporting us on Patreon. I've got some juicy videos on there that I just cannot share on the public channel. So if you want to check out the juiciness, go check it out. Thanks for being here, guys. Thanks to Finding Craigie, Jay, Scott, for all the awesome comments, and everyone else. Sorry, I can't remember everybody's names. And we will see you guys in the next video. Peace.